We live in an era marked by restlessness. Despite technological advancements and the endless possibilities the modern world offers, many people feel a deep emptiness within themselves. This feeling is not just a mild discomfort or a fleeting dissatisfaction, but rather a persistent anguish, a lack of direction that makes life dull, colorless, and meaningless. It is as if, regardless of what is achieved, something essential is always missing. The curious thing is that this restlessness pushes us outside of ourselves. We seek relief in relentless entertainment, social media, impulsive shopping, excessive work, or even in relationships that do not fulfill us. We try to silence this discomfort by filling every minute of our day, without realizing that the more we chase external distractions, the further we drift from the only thing that can truly bring us peace, the connection with our own selves. Social media clearly illustrates this phenomenon. In a world where everyone seems to be living their best lives, it is easy to fall into the trap of comparison. We see images of people who appear to have everything under control: successful careers, perfect relationships, dream vacations. This makes us feel small, insufficient. But what we fail to realize is that this constant comparison is not based on reality, but rather on a carefully filtered and edited version of other people's lives. And the impact of this is profound. We create unrealistic expectations for ourselves, trying to fit into unattainable standards. And when we inevitably fail, we feel even more lost. Furthermore, we live in a cycle of relentless information. At every moment, we are bombarded with news of economic crises, global conflicts, and an uncertain future. Anxiety grows because we feel we have no control over what is happening around us. We feel fear, powerlessness, a restlessness that seems to have no solution. But what we rarely realize is that this anxiety does not come solely from the external world. The emptiness we carry is not just a consequence of social pressures, political uncertainties, or the demands of modern life. It has deeper roots, which we often ignore. And as long as we continue trying to fill this void with superficial solutions, we will never find the real answer. This is where Carl Jung's perspective comes in. To him, symptoms of anxiety and anguish are not mere problems to be quickly eliminated, but rather valuable signs, messages from the unconscious trying to show us something essential about ourselves. When we feel lost, when nothing seems to make sense, this feeling is not a mistake. It is a calling, an invitation to look inward and understand what is really happening in our psyche. However, this inner calling is not easy to hear. We are so used to seeking answers outside of ourselves that we have become almost incapable of listening to what happens within. From a young age, we are taught to follow patterns, to meet expectations, to shape ourselves according to what the world expects of us. But what happens when those expectations conflict with who we really are? When what we build externally does not reflect our deepest truth? The emptiness many feel does not come out of nowhere. It grows silently when we distance ourselves from our essence, when we force ourselves to live a life that does not resonate with our true identity. And without realizing it, we begin to exist in a fragmented way, as if we were two people at once, the one we show to the world and the one we keep hidden inside. The greater this discrepancy, the greater the anguish. Imagine someone who chooses a career not out of passion, but because they were convinced it was the most sensible decision. Or someone who stays in a relationship simply out of fear of loneliness. Or even someone who constantly forces themselves to please others, denying their own desires to avoid conflict. At first, these decisions may seem like small concessions, but over time, this disconnection between what we do and what we truly want becomes unsustainable. Anxiety begins to emerge. The lack of meaning intensifies. The void expands. Jung believed that this detachment from our inner truth was one of the greatest causes of psychological suffering. He saw neurosis not as a mere mental illness, but as a sign that something in our life is out of alignment. In other words, when we do not live according to our essence, our psyche reacts. The body may continue functioning, the routine may carry on as usual, but something inside us cries out for change. Yet, instead of listening to this call, we try to silence it. And how do we do that? Through distractions. We fill ourselves with endless tasks, seek external validation, numb ourselves with social media, excessive consumption, food, work, or even chemical substances. And often, we turn to quick fixes that promise to alleviate this discomfort without requiring real change. In recent years, there has been an exponential increase in the use of medications for anxiety and depression. There is no doubt that these treatments can be essential for many people and have their value. However, Jung would warn us of a danger. When we use these solutions merely to eliminate the symptoms without investigating their causes, we risk masking a deeper problem. Psychological suffering does not arise without reason. It has a purpose. It pushes us toward change. But if we limit ourselves to treating the effects without questioning the origins, we remain trapped in the same cycle, repeating the same patterns, feeling the same emptiness, never finding a true way out. And this is the big question. How can we break free from this cycle? How can we begin to see anxiety and the feeling of emptiness not as enemies but as guides showing us a different path? The search for a quick solution to emotional suffering has become the norm in our society. The discomfort we feel seems like something that must be immediately eliminated, as if anguish were a mistake rather than a sign. But Carl Jung saw this differently. To him, the symptoms of anxiety and inner emptiness are not isolated problems to be suppressed, but clues to a deeper disconnection within us. When we try to eliminate these sensations without understanding them, it is as if we are turning off an alarm without investigating why it went off. Antidepressants and anxiolytics, for example, can be extremely useful, but when used without careful attention to the root of the problem, they only silence a symptom that will continue to exist in the background. That is why so many people report that even after continuous use of medication, the feeling of emptiness persists. Something is still misaligned. Something has yet to be understood. But if the problem is not solely in external factors and cannot be resolved with superficial solutions, then where does this emptiness truly originate? For Jung, the answer lies in the conflict between who we are and who we believe we should be. From an early age, we learn to create a persona, a social mask that allows us to function in the world. This persona is not inherently bad. It helps us relate to others and adapt. However, when we fully identify with this mask and forget our true essence, imbalance arises. How many times have we forced ourselves to be something we are not just to be accepted? How many decisions have we made based on others' expectations rather than our true desires? And worse still, how many times have we convinced ourselves that we are happy when, deep down, we feel that something is wrong? This self-deception, this disconnection between the life we present and the life we truly want to live, is one of the main causes of emotional suffering. And this disconnection does not happen overnight. It builds up slowly, often without us realizing it. Small choices made out of fear, small concessions that seemed harmless at first. Until one day, we wake up and realize that we no longer recognize the person we have become. The weight of routine, the lack of purpose, the feeling that we are merely existing rather than truly living. The truth is, human beings were not made to live a meaningless life. When we ignore our true desires, our psyche finds ways to alert us. This can manifest through anxiety, apathy, constant stress, or even psychosomatic illnesses. Our body and mind are always trying to show us that something is wrong, but are we willing to listen? If we do not take the time to reflect on these signs, we risk spending our lives trying to fix surface-level problems without ever addressing the true root of our suffering. We keep seeking external validation, filling our time with distractions, hoping that something or someone will bring us the answer. But deep down, we know that this answer will not come from the outside. What we truly need is not more distractions, but a reunion with what we have left behind along the way. The problem is that this reunion does not happen automatically. Recognizing the emptiness is not enough. It takes courage to dive into it. And this is where many people give up because the process of self-discovery is not comfortable. It requires us to face difficult truths, to question the narratives we have built about ourselves, and to accept the possibility of change. But if we ignore this calling, if we continue living on autopilot, what happens? If we keep running from ourselves, life will find a way to confront us. And this confrontation can take many forms. If we ignore the signs that something within us is misaligned, sooner or later, life will find a way to force us to face them. What was once just a silent discomfort can turn into anxiety crises, deep emotional exhaustion, or even physical symptoms. It is as if the psyche is saying, "If you don't want to look at this voluntarily, I will make you see it." Carl Jung believed that psychological suffering is not a mistake, but rather a call for transformation. When we feel trapped, when anguish feels suffocating, it does not mean that we are out of options. It means we are being invited to change. The problem is that this change is not always easy. Within each of us, there are conflicting forces. On one hand, the desire for growth, authenticity, and to live a life that truly has meaning. On the other, the fear of change, the attachment to what we already know, the inertia that keeps us in our comfort zone. And often, this fear wins. Jung saw this conflict as one of the main factors leading to neurosis. To him, neurosis was not just a mental disorder, but a response from the psyche when we fail to resolve the internal tensions that inhabit us. This means that suffering does not arise solely from past traumas, but mainly from dilemmas we are facing in the present and cannot resolve. And what are these dilemmas? They vary from person to person, but there are some universal challenges that we all, at some point, must confront. Jung believed there are fundamental tasks that are part of the human journey: achieving emotional independence, finding a purpose that goes beyond mere survival, building meaningful relationships, and inevitably facing the awareness of our own mortality. If we run from these issues, if we avoid the challenges that life places before us, our psyche responds with symptoms. A person who has never faced their fears may develop crippling anxiety. Someone who represses their true desires may fall into a state of apathy and lack of motivation. Those who refuse to confront their internal conflicts may project them onto others, living in constant misunderstandings and resentments. This escape can take many forms. Some people avoid internal confrontation by throwing themselves into excessive work. Others distract themselves with superficial relationships, consumerism, social media, or anything else that keeps their mind occupied. And sometimes, even emotional symptoms become an escape. The person identifies so much with their anxiety or depression that they use it as a justification for not acting, for not changing. But Jung warns us, as long as we do not face these issues head-on, they will continue to haunt us. No matter how much we try to ignore them, they do not disappear. On the contrary, they become more intense. And this is how we fall into the vicious cycle of dissatisfaction, of repeating the same mistakes, of feeling trapped in something we cannot explain. The only way out then is to face this process with courage. But to do that, we must first recognize one of the greatest enemies of our growth: inertia. The fear of change, the reluctance to move forward, to let go of what is familiar, even when that familiarity is causing us suffering. This fear keeps us trapped in patterns that no longer serve us. And often, we fail to realize that by avoiding the discomfort of change, we are choosing an even greater suffering, the suffering of a life that does not represent us, of an existence where we feel that we are merely surviving rather than truly living. Inertia is one of the greatest obstacles to personal transformation. Even when we realize that something in our life is not right, that we are disconnected from ourselves, there is an internal force that keeps us exactly where we are. It is the fear of the unknown, the reluctance to abandon what is familiar, even when that familiarity causes us suffering. Jung believed that this resistance to change is a fundamental characteristic of the human psyche. Our unconscious tends to repeat patterns because they give us a sense of security. Even if a habit or a way of living imprisons us, it is predictable, and predictability feels safer than the unknown. But at the same time, there is another force within us: the need for growth, for evolution, for finding a true sense of purpose in our existence. The problem is that when we ignore this need for evolution, we pay a price. Psychological suffering intensifies, the emptiness grows, and anxiety becomes increasingly difficult to bear. At this point, many people enter a dangerous cycle of self-deception. They create justifications to remain where they are, blame external factors for their stagnation, and believe they need to wait for the right moment to act. But Jung warns us, that right moment never comes. If we wait for perfect external conditions to change, we will spend our entire lives waiting. And then, an even more dangerous phenomenon arises: psychological regression. When we do not face our challenges, when we run away from our own process of growth, our psyche finds an alternative path. Instead of maturing, we may regress, reverting to more childish ways of dealing with life. This manifests in various ways: emotional dependency, self-destructive behaviors, chronic procrastination, disproportionate outbursts of anger, or even the desire to escape reality through addictions or empty distractions. Regression does not mean that we are consciously choosing to act immaturely. It happens because, without realizing it, our psyche is trying to protect us from the pain of growth. After all, growing means facing uncomfortable truths. It means taking responsibility, abandoning illusions, and recognizing that some of our pains are direct consequences of our own choices. And not everyone is willing to deal with that. But no matter how much we try to avoid it, life does not allow us to escape forever. The more we postpone this process, the more intense it becomes. Time moves forward, the world around us continues to change, and if we remain the same, we start to feel an even heavier burden. The feeling that something is wrong intensifies. The suffering becomes unbearable. And this is when many people reach a breaking point. When the pain of staying the same becomes greater than the fear of change, we finally open ourselves to transformation. But we do not need to wait until we reach this extreme to act. We do not need to let suffering accumulate until the breaking point. We can consciously choose to begin this process before circumstances impose it on us. The question is, how do we do that? How do we break out of stagnation, overcome fear, and take the first steps toward a more authentic and meaningful life? Transformation begins the moment we become aware that we can no longer continue living the same way. But simply realizing this is not enough. How many times have we had moments of clarity, promised ourselves that we would do things differently, only to be swallowed back into routine and old habits? Self-knowledge cannot be just an intellectual concept. It must be put into practice. Jung teaches us that true change does not happen all at once, like a sudden revelation that resolves all our problems. It happens gradually, in the form of small daily decisions. The first step is accepting that there are no shortcuts. There is no book, video, or advice that will magically transform your life. The journey to finding yourself requires effort, requires deconstructing old beliefs, and, most importantly, requires the willingness to face yourself without masks. This means abandoning the need to please everyone, stopping living to meet external expectations, and starting to ask difficult questions. Who am I really? Which parts of my life do not reflect my essence? What am I avoiding looking at? These questions can be uncomfortable because they force us to confront truths we have preferred to ignore. But without this radical honesty, we remain trapped in the same illusion. Jung said that the journey toward individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, is a path of integration. This means that it is not about rejecting parts of ourselves, but about embracing, understanding, and transforming them. Fear, anger, anxiety, insecurity, all of these are parts of who we are. And the more we fight against these aspects, the stronger they become. True freedom comes when we stop running and start listening to what these feelings are trying to tell us. That is why the symptoms of anxiety and emptiness should not be seen as enemies. They are messages from our unconscious, signs that something inside us needs to be reorganized. Instead of suppressing them, we can learn from them. Instead of trying to ignore discomfort, we can use it as a compass, pointing us toward the path that needs to be explored. But this journey does not have to be solitary. Jung believed that the process of self-knowledge is intensified when we share our experiences, when we seek guidance, when we have the courage to express what we feel without fear of judgment. Often, simply exchanging ideas with people who are facing the same challenges helps us see perspectives we could not see alone. And perhaps this is the greatest lesson of all. We are not alone in this search. The feeling of emptiness, disconnection, of not knowing exactly who we are or where we are going, is not exclusive to a few people. It is a universal human experience. At some point, We all face this inner calling to look within and question the direction of our lives. What differentiates those who find an authentic path from those who remain lost is not the absence of fear or doubt, but rather the courage to move forward despite them. If this message resonated with you, if at any point in this video you felt that these words brought clarity to something within you, then this reflection was already worthwhile. Self-knowledge is a continuous process, and every step on this journey makes all the difference. If you enjoyed this content and believe that more people need to hear this, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. This not only helps me continue bringing reflections like this, but also ensures that more people have access to this knowledge. And of course, share your thoughts in the comments. I want to know how this topic resonated with you.